super excited that so many people are excited about the future of the news business. This was the event, I think, in our kind of history that sold out most quickly. We're like, wow, that is fantastic. The reason, for the people who don't know me, my name is Anita Zilina, and the reason why I'm excited about these topics is I run programs here at the school that specifically deal, with giving media leaders the skills they need to drive transformation and innovation in the news business, and especially focus on the business side and product side of things. So it's fantastic to see so many interested and like-minded people here. We're going to have a little panel discussion tonight, and afterwards, I hope you can all stay for drinks and snacks. Before I introduce my fellow panelists here, I want to say thank you to our friends from Chartbeat who have been sponsoring this event and the event series. Thank you very much, and are responsible for the drinks and food we're going to get. And I want to start right in and not waste too much time, because actually everyone else on the panel has so much more to say than I do. So we'll get going quickly. I'm very excited that I have the three of them, because we're going to talk about revenue diversification today. And that's something that's been on my mind, and I think many people's mind for a while, because the media industry seems to have this weird tendency of hoping for one solution that's going to solve all of the problems at the same time. It changes. At some point that was the pivot to video. Now it feels like it's the pivot to subscriptions to a certain extent. And while subscriptions are definitely important, we're going to talk a little bit about whether that pivoting back and forth is the right strategic way to do it, and whether it's enough to focus on advertising and subscriptions, or whether there might be other topics that we should focus on as an industry. Let me introduce my fellow panelists, and I think many of you might know them. Sara Fisher is the media reporter at Axios, and she writes one of, I think, the best newsletters in the media business, Axios Media Trends. Thank you so much for being here, Sara. And I think what will be especially interesting is that, of course, you can talk about Axios as a company, but you can also, I feel you're one of the persons who has a really, really great overview over what's going on in the news business in the US and abroad, so I'm very excited about that. Jarrod Dicker. Jarrod is the VP Commercial at Washington Post, and he's also the founder of RED, their R&D group. Is that the correct way to put it? And I don't know if that was planned, but Jarrod started a whole kind of wave of discussion today on Twitter around revenue diversification. So I think that we're going to have a lot to talk about today. And Carolina Guerrero is the co-founder and CEO of Radio Ambulante, a Spanish-speaking podcast company that I think is particularly interesting because, Carolina, you show with your organization that it's not, you don't have to be the New York Times or Washington Post to be successful with revenue diversification. You can be a smaller organization and be really smart about these things, and that's something we're going to talk about. So may I invite you to come with me on stage? Wherever you, yeah. Tough choice. So let's maybe get started with the question, the very basic question of how does your organization make money?
Is this on? Is that through? I just want to make sure. It's not. Oh, it's not. So, hi, I'm Jarrod Dicker. I oversee the commercial group at the Post. How does our organization make money? I think I overgeneralize, but there are kind of three major pillars that we invest and focus on. One of which is advertising on our owned and operated channels and platforms. The second one is subscriptions, which is a growing business and one that lots of people are very excited to talk about. And three, which is very unique to the Post, is our software as a service business. So we have a technology suite called Arc Publishing that's been in market for about 5 years now, which really focuses on content creator tools, workflow management tools, asset management tools that we have in market for other publishers, sites, even brands like BP to be able to license and take advantage of, which is a growing business. I think at this, as of today, we're powering, I think, north of 700 sites across the world. And then we have a new business called Zeus, which is kind of complementary to ARC, that's really focused on being able to build software around how sites, publishers, and brands can make more money, how they could drive more revenue, and how we invest in building these products and bring them out to market, which is a new endeavor, which we launched about 6 months ago, which is growing as well. So those three major pillars are what we're focusing on, and then there's a bunch of other kind of experiments and things that we're looking into to be able to even diversify that further.
Fantastic. Sarah.
Yes, and they also have an events team at the
Yes,
Washington
we do
Post.
events.
They sponsor events. Axios makes most of its money off of advertising. We sell a lot of advertising around newsletters, and that's different from the advertising that we sell on the website because the website is CPM based. You pay for every 1,000 impressions, whereas the newsletters are a little bit more like sponsored or underwritten. You pay for the reach of thousands of subscribers to those newsletters. We don't sell any programmatic advertising. All of our advertising is sold directly from our sales team to the brands directly. We do sell some performance ads, meaning we'll sell them a little bit cheaper around remnant or leftover inventory, but most of our advertising is pretty high end and it's pretty brand heavy, advocacy heavy, meaning we sell it to people who are looking to persuade Congress to sign a bill, or if Facebook wants to persuade Congress that they shouldn't be broken up, they'll buy ads in Axios. We also sell events similar to the Washington Post that are underwritten around a variety of topics, whether it's media, healthcare, science, or politics. And then the last thing is we are doing a show with HBO, and we do get money from that, where we, sort of license out some of our talent and intellectual property to co-produce that show. And there have been reports that I'm not able to discuss about Axios building out sort of a high-end corporate subscription product. That is the extent that which I could speak to it, but I bring it up so that you are aware we are diversifying our revenue, but we are a new company. We're only 3 years old, so we need to sort of crawl, then walk, then run.
Yeah. So I'm Carolina with Ambulante. We until last year, this is a company, is a podcast, Spanish language podcast, distributed by NPR. It's an independent company from NPR. So until last year, we signed a distribution deal with NPR 3 years ago. But the company was founded like 7 years ago. So before at the beginning, I'm gonna just like do very briefly like the route that took us here. At the beginning, this was co-founded by me and my husband, who's here, and it was just a podcast, right? So we started with foundation support, mostly representing 100% of the income, and then and last year we had like 50% was came from foundation support, 50% from this contract with NPR, and this year we have been investing. I mean, we have been creating these plans to diversify the revenue for a few years, but only we are seeing the results this year. So today we have 40% comes from foundation support, 25% comes from NPR, and the rest of the percentages are coming from members now. We launched a membership program in November that is actually growing very fast. We don't have anything behind the paywall, but the community is very tight, and we have a very close relationship with the listeners of Ambulante. We invested in the last couple of years. We started noticing this audience that were this community of listeners who are not Latinos or they don't speak Spanish as a native language, and they were using Ambulante to learn Spanish. So we partnered with a technology company and created an app that takes our content and transform it in very smart lessons that you can like help you to improve your Spanish. And we launched this in November, but quietly, but we have been selling so well. So now it represents like 10% of the revenue, but we are projecting if everything goes well, that it will represent kind of like, it can be like really like a money maker. This app is not free, but is very, we're serving this audience and is very, I think the product is very, very good. And then we are also now also like working with the IP. We have a catalog of many episodes, high quality IP, and we are in negotiations for like make it series and movies now, and I think that's gonna bring like 10% again this year. We'll see.
The fantastic thing about that is 3 completely different organizations, completely different sizes, and so distinct revenue strategies, such distinct revenue strategies. And what I find really, really striking, and what I'd like to talk a little bit about and hear your opinion on, is that seems, of course, there is experimentation, like with every more disruptive business model, but it seems in your cases a very conscious choice to go that diversification route. Is that so? Is that a conscious kind of diversifying the pie more and more, the revenue pie?
Yeah, well, I think I have very strong opinions here. I think, well, one of which, you think about like just focusing on advertising, let's say, and the media relationship with advertisers and its readers over the past few decades prior to, the launch of major distribution platforms like Facebook. It was all about ownership and kind of that one-to-one relationship that you had across the board, whether that was directly with your reader or directly with your advertiser or directly with kind of the operations and processes that help deliver the product that you were kind of offering. You really had kind of that relationship and that ownership to be able to dictate how your business was going to turn out. Like there's I have a friend whose father had a very high-level sales job at CBS in the late 80s, and he said every morning he'd get a call from an advertiser to say, how much does this spot cost? And he'd literally just make up the price, and they'd say, okay, we're going to pay it, right? So there was absolute control because you had that platform. There was a desire for that platform. You knew your audience. You had the relationship with the advertiser, and you essentially dictated your business. When the platforms kind of came around, that whole entire offering changed because it opened up opportunities for scale and targeting and reach. And at that point, I know Jeff Jarvis and I agree at this point, publishers made a conscious decision to start to play that game. I think there's a lot of arguments where that are said that, platforms blew up the media business. But in fact, I remember very early on in being in my prior life at the Huffington Post, we essentially built our content management systems and our delivery systems in order to go viral and win an SEO and get shares and essentially be able to achieve that reach. So we made a conscious decision to kind of play the platform game, to play the reach game, to change the way that we built relationships and built our business in order to try to capitalize on that trend, which now it's like, oh no, right, we totally lost control. So I think like that sort of acknowledgement shows that you need to diversify because these business units and revenue streams change and you don't necessarily know when they're going to change. And you do have an opportunity to try to lead that change by investing maybe in the software that you leverage or the medium in which you deliver across. But you could also play the defensive game by essentially diversifying your dependence on these different revenue streams. So subscriptions and consumer revenue is a big one. We do an excellent job doing that for the Post. If I take my Post hat off, I'm very concerned by every single media company thinking that there's this huge consumer revenue pie that they're all of a sudden going to be able to flock to. I think that's extremely dangerous. But I do think that there's different opportunities to think about an inverse relationship from consumers being able to unlock and subscribe where media companies benefit, but not necessarily in a traditional bundle approach. But the one thing that I would say, especially when it comes to what we do and we being the media industry and our ability to diversify is that we, especially like in legacy media, have a great reputation and a great value that we're able to leverage in order to jump into new opportunities. So we have this discussion all the time. I think ARC Publishing within the Post is extremely successful because it was built at the Washington Post, right? We built CMSs outside of the Washington Post. I was at a couple in my previous life, and it's a lot harder to gain traction and to gain value when you don't have one of the largest, and most dominant newsrooms to be able to test this software and technology on. And the same thing with Zeus now. So I think diversifying revenue is both defensive and offensive. I think you need to, in order to secure your business. You also do have the opportunity, based on what your brand offers and the value of your brand, to be able to pioneer and chart new waters. But yes, I mean, I think it's mandatory at this point. I think there are some that may say that it's not, but I think they're bluffing.
Thanks, Jarrod. Sara.
I think that I agree with Jarrod. On the defensive side, it's something I report about a lot, but I will just say I agree with Jarrod, and so I'll leave the defensive side there because Axios launched after that apocalypse, so we never thought that we were going to get Facebook traffic or Google traffic and build a business off of that. But what we did see is if we looked around the market, we saw that suddenly people and IP and teams were becoming really valuable. So I think a big wake-up call was when Steve Ballmer bought the Clippers for $2 billion. I think people thought that's outrageous. Why would you spend so much money on a team? Like, is a team worth that? And what he saw, which was right, is a team is worth that because the value of the sport, of the players, of the fandom, the jerseys, the merchandising, everything is starting to become more valuable. In a world where we're switching from analog to digital, choice is ample. And people are flocking to brands, to teams, to celebrities, to journalists, to authority to help them make decisions. And thus, those types of entities are going up in value. That's why Steve Ballmer paid $2 billion to the Clippers, and that's why a lot of media companies are starting to realize when it comes to diversifying their revenue, we're sitting on something more valuable that's becoming more and more valuable every day, which is true IP and, in a sense, fandom. Like, the reason that the New York Times, the Washington Post, they're making so much money on subscriptions is not because people think that they're going to get some sort of, White House coverage that they can't get anywhere else. They can, of course, but I think they're doing it because they're fans of that brand. They want to support that brand. And at Axios, we're making money that way. We're licensing our IP to Hollywood studios, to HBO, and we're making money off of it. We are selling journalists newsletters that come off on behalf of the journalists and their name. We're selling their brands. When they sell a Media Trends event, they're not just selling the concept and the idea, but they're selling the fact that I'm, hopefully, moderating it. And so this concept of authority sells is a huge part of, I think, why we are all diversifying. And I'm happy that we finally realized it, but I'm also happy that the whole market is starting to realize it because it's kind of like high tides lift all boats. And it's a good time right now, I think, if you have a strong product or IP to start making money off of it.
Yeah, so I agree with what you said. But imagine, like, I run this organization. It's 20 people. It's a remote team. We are 3 in New York, and it's just like so the team is so valuable. I mean, it and also like Ambulante is still like the podcast in Spanish, the industry is very lonely still. There are many podcasts, but more like interview format. We do long form, like kind of like Radio Lab or This American Life, of this kind of content. So we have a very valuable, skilled team, but like the team is the core and soul of any project. And for us, for example, that diversification, even though we know that the team is very important, I mean, we know that the team is the most important, so the culture is very important. So for example, every time for a small organization like ours, when we try to diversify, we have, like I mentioned, only 3 sources of revenue. I could also like mention our online store. For a small organization, every t-shirt sold is like gold, right? Like, it matters. But also, like, that diversification comes with capacity, and that's one challenge for Ambulante, because we are now, with 22 employees, like people working at Ambulante, we're feeling that the operations, like, we need like really pay attention to operations. We are understaffed. We want to hire we are debating who do we hire first, and we need to hire like 8 people, but we're starting with 2. And every, like, for example, with the IP that we're selling also to Hollywood, there is a lot of interest, but it's just like Daniel and I running these conversations and doing this business. He's executive producer. He has like other, like he writes, he teaches. So it's not just that you can just go for it, and it's not as easy for a small organization to hire a team to just pursue these opportunities. So I think, but we really believe that we need to diversify. The problem is that in our case, at Ambulante, we need to do very smart choices, and sometimes some projects need to be put on hold, no? And that's, sometimes it's heartbreaking, but you just need to put it on hold.
And I think that's such an important point that kind of builds on something that when we had the first class of the executive program here last week and the strategy class, we talked about strategy being also about, or mostly about, stopping things and deciding against certain experiments. So I don't know if any of you have read Julie Posetti's report on Bright Shiny Things, where she talks about this not healthy R&D or innovation, where it's literally about throwing spaghetti to the wall and like going crazy and just hoping that something will stick. So I feel it seems to be a fine line between smart and strategic innovation and just going crazy over experiments and never finishing and stopping something. How do you walk that fine line?
Can I respond to
Of
what you're
course.
saying? I think like that thin line, for example, with grants, is like it will be great that if we could just like get paid to do journalism that we want to do, right? And we have like, besides, I mean, we also do live shows, not just sponsored by the Washington Post, hopefully soon, but it's just like so many things and sources of revenue, and we have the ability to pursue these opportunities. We all could do that. It's just like it's so hard. So I think, for example, with grants, that's the thin line, that sometimes you just, until you don't build that relationship with the foundation, that they say, oh, this is for general capacity, do whatever you want to do with the money. You have to show them every year like a shiny thing, no? It's like, oh, and this year we're creating, and then you have to come up with like a great idea, instead of like, oh, this year what I want to do is to do what I know how to do. And I think that's when you have to choose between like, do I pursue a grant or do I pursue an app? That seems super complicated for an organization like ours.
And it's probably not that different in a very sizable newsroom, right, or news organization.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing I'd say, because everyone's probably terrified that they're not diversifying their revenue, is like, if you look at the major platforms that are driving a lot of the dollars today, they're not diversified, right? Like, if you look at Facebook is like 96.8% ads, Netflix is 100% subscriptions, right? So it's not something that's like, if we're not doing it and not focused on it, we're doomed, right? And I think we're seeing some of the most successful companies in the world, leaning in and doubling down on areas that are more important to them. What I would say when it comes to being able to kind of experiment and figure it out is, I think there's a lot of indicators out there that people want to ignore because they want to kind of hold on to things that are currently operative and important for their businesses today. And that's a very hard leap to take. So we see that especially at the Washington Post, right? We have local advertising markets. We have newsroom, right? We're trying to monetize news, right? Which I think that there's an argument, I'm not going to say which way I'm on, but whether that can actually grow, right? Like whether monetizing content is actually a strategy, right, for the future, or if there are other things that you should be doing outside of it. I think when you think about like actual ability, like there are way too many ads on the web and on single web pages right now. The only way to make more money through advertising is to add more ads or charge higher CPMs, both of which are seemingly impossible for a lot of open web opportunities. So I think there's like things that are obvious where you need to essentially like rip off the Band-Aid and start to think about how you can invest and start to see if opportunities open up, and then be able to kind of execute on that. I think in very small organizations, that's somewhat easier because whether how you're funded or, there's a lot of excitement or opportunity in kind of the area you're building, that you are essentially encouraged to experiment. And then in organizations like ours, we're very fortunate. We have an owner, right, that kind of enables that and, gives that opportunity and gives that encouragement for us to be able to think about different opportunities outside. But I think, again, I think there are indicators. I think it's very hard, especially when you're looking at how to operate your business, how to balance operation with kind of innovating and exploring new options. But there are ways to do it. There's ways to do it through partnership. There's ways to do it through trying to figure out what you already do and being able to extend it. I remember in the early days at the Post, when we were thinking about how to drive more ad revenue, we wanted to kind of go beyond opportunity of actually advertising on the Post and think about what is the value that we could give to advertisers that they can't give elsewhere. And we looked at the way that we were creating video through our newsroom, and we saw that within the video player there was a way to take a 15-second video or 30-second video MP4 and convert it to a GIF. And we started to think about what that could actually mean for advertising. And what we were seeing through stats is that on mobile and social web at that time, 85% of videos were watched without the volume on. So we took a tool that we used in the newsroom and we went to advertisers and said, look, your 15 and 30-second advertising video clips that you put on television, when they're put on the web, because you're going to reuse those assets, no one could hear them. So here's a tool that in 5 minutes we could convert it to a GIF and add closed captioning, and now voila, there's engagement. And that was a multi-million-dollar new revenue stream that we created, just trying to pull together things that we do in the newsroom and resources and make them applicable. So very long story short, I think storytelling is extremely valuable in this space. People love a great story, especially when you're tying it to revenue and opportunity. So being able to kind of blend those things, until you're proven wrong, you're able to somewhat get a head start if you want to start testing new areas.
I'd love to kind of have you step out of your Axios shoes and into your looking at the industry as a whole shoes for a minute. And I'd love to hear your opinion. You said we are kind of at this, verge of everyone or all the organizations understanding that diversification and focusing on your user is important. And I'm just going to play devil's advocate a little bit here. Is that really the case for very legacy organizations? I mean, it definitely is the case for some that made the shift, like the Post, the Times, the Journal. But is it really the case that we can already say, well, there is a broad understanding that the user and kind of a very specific relation with that user and that diversified revenue stream built on that relation is important?
Yep. Well, from the TV network perspective, they know it because they are charging more right now for subscription fees, what are called retransmission fees. It's the fee that they charge pay TV distributors, satellite companies, cable companies to distribute their content. They know they have to diversify because ad revenue is falling out, so that's part of what they're doing. And you're seeing plenty of TV networks also creating direct-to-consumer streaming services. So they get it. And if you're a company like Disney or Comcast and you own great IP, look at how else they distribute their IP. I mean, Disney's making a lot of money on theme parks. And that's because they are buying up things like Star Wars and The Mandalorian and even TV shows, and they're using that IP to make slides or sell T-shirts. So the networks totally get it. The national newspapers, as we just discussed, get it. Who doesn't get it? Local. Local is the ones that were too slow to act, and I'll tell you why. Local companies, for a long time, were the only game in town. They didn't really have local competition because you very rarely have more than one major newspaper in most local and some regional towns. In some big cities, sure, Chicago Sun-Times and Chicago Tribune, but when you get down to small towns, it's not like that. And so when you're the only game in town, for a long time, really the 19th and the 20th centuries, there was a very solid and sustainable business. And I think that group never was able to define their IP the way that national organizations were, define their value add, because they never had to. Their value was that they were the only people you could read your local news on. Suddenly, when technology made it so that you can get your news so much more easily on your phone or whatever through crowdsourced means, the local papers and stations had some competition. And I think they were the ones that were really flat-footed about how do we develop that direct relationship, that strong relationship with the consumer. And they're the ones, quite frankly, who are struggling the most right now. And I don't blame the local papers. There are so many factors that are involved as to why they're struggling. I would argue there's a regulatory problem. I mean, we just increased the newspaper and broadcast ownership caps like last year. So it's not totally their fault. But I do think that if I had to, the answer to your question, does everybody get it? People at the national level, whether you're radio, whether you're broadcast, whether you're print, they get it. And digital. I think local is where I see the problem.
We have a room of smart people here and a panel of smart people, and I don't want to spend too much time with the doom and gloom side of things. But the question that I have is, where does that leave us? Because there are a lot of efforts going on right now to save local journalism. Part of these efforts focused on legacy local organizations and kind of helping them to gain traction and redefine their business model. And part of that invested in kind of helping to start up new ventures. Question 1, is either of that gonna work? Question 2, if not, what else should we do?
If you take a look at other westernized democracies, there is a huge difference between what we invest in public media versus what they invest. I'm talking about the Nordic countries, BBC in the UK, parts of Europe. And the difference there is that the information gap between those that are very wealthy and highly educated and those that are very are not as educated and lower household incomes, that information gap is much smaller in those places. In the United States, the Trump administration proposed last Monday $0 to support NPR and PBS through the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. And I think first and foremost, there's definitely a regulatory problem here. So I'd say that. Second of all, and sorry, am I answering your question right? Like, okay. Second of all, we do see a lot of philanthropic efforts. We're seeing billionaires come in. You know, there's a billionaire now owns the LA Times and San Diego Tribune. Seattle Times is a very wealthy family. Minneapolis Star Tribune, wealthy owners. But this is patchwork. You know, we even have some venture capital money through the American Journalism Project that's starting to be thrown at local. But this is all patchwork solutions. They are not societal solutions. And I think what we need to recognize is that journalism is a societal good. And it's one of the only businesses that's flat out mentioned, industries mentioned in our Constitution and Bill of Rights. And it's going to take more than just patchwork generosity from very wealthy people and from foundations. It's going to take a societal effort, and I believe there's a huge regulatory component to that.
To add on that, I think it's also going to be interesting. 10 years from now, it'll be even more interesting, but to think about the construct of media companies, especially local, 15, 20 years ago versus, in the next 5 years. And I think everyone essentially wanted to manage their business end to end, right? You had your own technology stack, you had your own engineering team, you had your own content management system, you had your own way of doing business, you had your own business operations. And all of these things, I think when we peel it off, and we're already seeing this with, what we do with ARC and Zeus, is that those are things that publishers, especially local, are willing to not have to fund, right, or manage anymore, as long as their rate of return is on par, if not higher than what they get now. And that is kind of what we're hoping to see in the local space. Like, I agree it's extremely important, and a lot of especially on ARC Publishing, we have Dallas Morning News, we have Boston Globe, and a bunch of others kind of across that landscape. And I think what we're seeing is that through a bunch of shared efforts, we could help kind of raise all ships and elevate the opportunity for these companies to execute on their product, which is journalism. So that could be shared software, that could be shared back office, that could be a way to sell advertising. And now I'd say, especially in this climate, there's a huge opportunity, with the cookie going away and Chrome changing their browser restrictions and Safari, and who knows, maybe Sarah will know what Apple's going to say in September. But there's a lot of kind of rumors about how the idea of data collection and targeting is going to go away. To me, that opens up an extremely huge opportunity when it comes to us being able to tackle things that we know really well, which is context, content, how people engage, and building a great relationship between brands and advertisers and those consumers. So I think a lot of investment is going in there. I think we're going to have to share a lot of resources. I'm concerned about the local markets because I do think those that are still trying to hang on to a lot of other things and own other things will struggle because it's very expensive and outside of the product. But our attempt and focus is really how we could build shared resources and build functions that allow them to continue to not just sustain but grow financially while investing in their communities.
I have like many doubts about this, like because I understand like both of your points of view, but the thing is that while we are investing so much in product that is necessary and obviously transforming from like in a local medium from like analog to digital is, you both know, you're a digital first medium, but like what it requires and all the technology that we also lack that technology, but we just found our way. It took us 3 years instead of like getting all the support that we needed. So I imagine, I kind of like think about those local medium, but the problem is, what I feel is that in the meantime, during the process, the journal, we see all these students like studying journalism here, and what's the promise for them? Because like really what journalism needs is journalists, reporters, reporting on the local community. And obviously when you live on a city, we all consume the New York Times, the Washington Post, Axios, all this, like, because it's easier even if you're on a local scale. But I think there is like the investment also has to be like, the attention has to be put on how to like make sure that there are local journalists from the community and they stay there, because like the transition, and also like reporters' works are less paid than product, and we know that. So or like it's happening now, instead that you work with this big media organization. So I think that's the other thing that should be like that we are concerned about, is also like the quality and of the reporters and the tools available for them to like keep growing as journalists and the access. No.
Can I follow up on that? I totally agree. You have a talent crisis, and part of it is because if you want to be a journalist, you look at what's happening in local and you say, oh God, I got to go to a city. There's nothing left. And because of that, but that's happening because we have an economic crisis around local news. And so I think you're absolutely right. Like there's such a talent problem. And I think the talent problem is a reflection of the poor local news economy. And so, like I said, there are patchwork efforts. The American Journalism Project is putting 14 reporters in state houses around the country, blah, blah, blah. But I worry that those efforts are just patchwork right now, and they're not a long-term sustainable solution.
The other thing that I hear sometimes, and that worries me when we look at philanthropy and foundation funding, is that I hear from startups that receive money. When I ask them, so what are you doing with that money? They're basically like, oh, we're spending it. And I'm like, well, but when it's gone, what are you going to do? And they're like, oh, then we're going to get more money from, funders. And I'm like, well, that doesn't seem like a sustainable, scalable solution. And I do see that, I feel that there is still this, and that's what I meant with the silver bullet in the beginning. I feel there is still this completely irrational hope that someone up there is going to just kind of drop a whole bag of gold and everything is going to be fine. Is that like just a psychological thing? Are we humans just,
Well,
are we that way?
Well, to the point about talent, I think, for the examples that we look at a lot of the larger media companies in this space, and then in local, it's like the large ones as well. And, I think we look at how they're operating and what their businesses will look like. And I think we need to see a transformation in the role that especially the larger media companies, but even local play. And I don't necessarily think that there's an acknowledgement there yet, right? I think when platforms came about and when people were leveraging Twitter and putting IP out there, and now we see it with Substack and a lot of these other opportunities, there's a concern and a fear that the way that we operationalize and the way that we've structured our businesses is going to drastically change if we start to focus and embrace those things. And what I think we'll see, and I think Axios, I always said this about Axios, and it's one of my favorite things about them, is like, I think that they've done an amazing job creating brands for each individual writer in their own right that you could follow. Like, I've followed Sara since day one, biggest fan in the room probably. But for a while, I didn't know who else wrote for Axios because I just followed Sara Fisher, right? And like, I think that they've done a great job, especially in this era, operationalizing their business to acknowledge that trend, but build a real business around it, right? And I think other media companies, whether in local or in larger, need to start thinking about that and acknowledging that too, that there are writers that have 100,000 followers on Twitter that could write on Medium or create a Substack and start generating revenue right away. So why do you write for a Washington Post or a New York Times, right? And what is that value that these larger companies could bring? So a lot of kind of the focus that we're thinking about too when we talk about further diversification is what does that mean for us, and what are things that we could give that maybe these other platforms can't, that will attract that talent and bring that talent back. In the local market, it's somewhat harder, but I think there is kind of this embrace of tools and products that could be used in order to get people excited and to allow them to kind of grow their influence and their experience, while also acknowledging the benefits of people being somewhat independent, which before, you know, it was about writing for this large media company, and now it's like, you know, about me and what is this company going to do for me.
And I think maybe just to add one point to that, what I feel is also the case, and having worked in many more legacy newsrooms and being the digital person in charge there, I feel that this is completely counterintuitive to the way that traditional legacy newsrooms were structured, where kind of the middle layer and the middle management had the power, like the head of the department and so forth. And now suddenly it's all about like the people building their kind of mini brands. So I think it's also a cultural revolution that is happening or should be happening. And as always, the culture part is the most intangible, but also the most difficult part.
Right, but some trends are happening with the larger, so like the New York Times, for example. I mean, this is just speculation, but Ben Smith, Taylor Lorenz, Corey Sika, you know, who all have huge followings, you know, are big talents, could write anywhere, right? You see them going to the New York Times, which clearly the Times is looking to bring in highly influential, great talent in order to help, you know, bolster or, you know, continue to kind of grow their influence. So like, I do think that it is the inverse of that logic. However, it's something that is being now acknowledged and is something that's frankly transparent. You know, you see someone like, you know, Ben Thompson do stratechery, and he does it extremely well, but there's others that'll continue to do that. And you need to kind of figure out what that value is in order to keep that talent, or else, you know, as a media company, what are you?
I think for following, I agree with that, but following, like if you transfer that to local news organizations, the timeline, I mean, the timing is really like the clock is really ticking, because the problem is that while it's so easy for organizations, for larger organizations to do these transformations, and you have done like a lot, Anita, or like moving and transforming digital newsrooms, huge digital newsrooms in Europe, but I think for local organizations, the problem is that in the meantime, these 3 years, 4 years, the country goes downhill because the coverage is not, you know, like, I mean, the elections, you pass one election cycle, another election cycle, and in the meantime, like helping this newsroom to, because at the beginning you used to send a newspaper and you just like send it to this address and you knew nothing about who lived in that house, what their you know, so it was just like ads general from the local business around. But now you need to know who are receiving the news, and I think that transformation. I mean, all the process sounds like brilliant, but when you just take it to a little newsroom, how do they know what are the tools available? How can they learn from that? How can they create this connection? And I think local newsrooms need to create that connection with the community and rebuild it. And I agree, like rethink about it, but it's not just as easy just because of like many of these local media organizations or newspapers are in hands of like families or reporters, long time, very well-known reporters in the town or cities.
I'd love to give people in the audience the time to ask questions. Please be so kind and use the mic, because we're actually creating a video, so otherwise we're not going to hear your question. Melissa will be so kind to pass around. Oh, we have extra mics. I don't have to share mine. That's even better. Thank you, Melissa. Melissa has the mic. We have someone here, and be so kind and say your name and affiliation when you ask a question.
Hey, John Levitt from Parsley. Sara, you and Jarrod specifically talked a lot about IP and the value of IP. Jarrod more from the tech perspective, Sara more from the talent perspective, and agree 100%, but like speaking again to local, those are really challenging, I think, for for local because tech is not necessarily a competency. And talent, like you have the big, publications poaching people from smaller organizations. So what do you, like currently, what would you suggest would be the most valuable IP that local organizations should lean into?
Hi, John.
Hi.
Thanks for coming. Patch is a local syndicated news company that I think does a really good job with this. What Patch has realized is that local actually has the most valuable IP because it's so hard to replicate. And what is that? It's school lunch calendars. It's public events. It's health updates, traffic and weather. And I think one thing about local news is that they've always focused on these things, but they never build it and sold their coverage of it as lifestyle services. They just sold it as news. Oh, you just get traffic and weather updates. No, actually, your local traffic update is incredibly valuable. And there's no reason that you should just be selling cheap ads around it. Like, people in their constituencies would pay big money to have real-time quality information about what's happening in the school, even if it's just a lunch calendar, what's happening on their roads. And so I think the problem is the IP is there. They're doing the great reporting. They're just, I think that they're not fully reconciling the value of it. And I think for a long time, the value was local businesses buy ads around it. And now I think the value should shift to consumers pay for this stuff. I think the problem is they don't have the technology, the sales forces necessarily to convert this strong IP into a consumer product. They don't have the marketing budgets to market it to consumers. And that's where I think the nexus of the challenge is. But I think the IP totally is there and will continue to be there. People are never going to want to stop hearing about these issues. It's just a matter of how you're making money off of it.
Yeah, and like I'd say, because I can see where we get stuck. Like when we think of news, everyone has their own kind of definition as to what news is. And to Sarah's point, like I spoke with the Patch folks recently too. And what's interesting is like now they're hiring what they'd call like seasoned journalists. But, back when they first started, they were inviting bloggers, right, that would write about the town. And, the feedback would be that people loved that personal touch, that when you went to a Starbucks, you would see the person that's essentially like writing and you would engage with them, and it brought a very big community element. Now, when like we say news in quotes, like what that is, I think this industry lost a huge opportunity on monetizing services, right? We constantly would say, okay, how do we monetize content and, the value of our content, and how is that completely connected to the work that we're doing? And right around us while we were doing that, Craigslist came out and took classifieds, LinkedIn came out and did job postings, and all functions and products that started local and grew national and were things that we knew extremely well and in fact monetized. But because of the focus and being a news organization and what we're supposed to be working on, that wasn't necessarily something that we should drop and invest in. So I think now when you think of new opportunity, it's hard for me to answer local because I do have an opinion, but I don't want to say it. But because I'm rooting for it. I think that we could look at what happened with classifieds and jobs and those sort of services and essentially say, like, what are the values that we bring today and how do we then commercialize and package them? Because there's a lot, like probably hundreds of things that we do within our newsrooms, whether that's how we're delivering to our consumers, to what we do internally and communication and engagement there, what we do with advertisers when it comes to consumer revenue, that are actual businesses in their own right. If we took them out of the functions of how it works within our specific company and really focused on building those, right? Substack is another one, right? It's newsletters, which is something that we've been doing the entire time, yet we haven't been able to think about what that looks like on a grander scale.
Can I quickly follow up on that? The national companies get this. The New York Times calls itself a lifestyle services company. Seriously, that's how they communicate their value to investors. And if you take a look at their subscribers, 1/3 of every new subscriber is subscribing to cooking or crossword apps. They're not subscribing to core news products. People are listening to Modern Love and they're watching Modern Love on Amazon. These are lifestyle services. They're not core news. And national is getting really good at understanding that. And I think local, you have Texas Tribune, you have some outlets that get this and are starting to lean into it with events and whatever. but they're totally outliers. They're not the majority of local.
Further questions in the audience? We have one here. Thank you. Astrid Dorner with Handelsblatt, a German business daily. I'm curious, is there a point where we diversify too much? Like everybody has events, has podcasts, has other stuff. So what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, for us, everything is too much. It's just like hard. Yeah, I mean, yes. I think what we're trying to do is to concentrate and give added value to the content and the IP and everything that we have and create, and try to monetize it in a way that serves the audience. That's what we're trying to do. Is just a cycle between trying to learn from our audience and identifying like odd situations. Like for example, our Spanish our audience is supposed to be like made from Latinos, Spanish language like speakers, and then suddenly there was this like percentage of like non-Latinos, non-native Spanish speakers, and then we were out. So consistent on surveys and metrics and everything. So we started like digging deep, and then created a product that we know that was valuable for them, because the experience for them was horrible on our website, and we said, oh, let's create something better and monetize it. And they are so thankful. So to put you an example, we launched a membership program recently, and people are also paying for the app. So some people are paying both things, you know? So I think but just managing the membership and the app, it's a challenge because of the capacity, but we want to just keep it there. And I think while it doesn't interfere with the culture of the organization, and we can grow like a healthy organization, I think that's you should just diversify as much as you can if you can manage it.
Yeah, so I'll give you two examples. The answer is yes, and it'll come very quickly and obviously. So one is it'll cannibalize your other businesses real quickly. So like we being very heavily on subscriptions and also advertising, there's opportunities, of course, that everyone knows about, which is distribution on Facebook or what you do at Snapchat and elsewhere. And you start to realize that you need to be careful and calculated as to what you do and when, in order to not cannibalize your existing businesses or take that value away, which again comes very obvious and quickly. The second is an example for opportunity to create a new business. So we, when was it now? Like 3.5 years ago, the Post was all in on Facebook Instant, right? Because why not at that time? And Google AMP at that time as well. And the whole pitch was, we wanted to reach our consumers where they were and give them the best experience possible, right? And these platforms were going to make a light page and an extremely fast experience to consume our content in a way that's ever been done before. 2 weeks into going all in, we sat around a table and we were like, holy shit, the worst experience to consume the Washington Post is on the Washington Post, right? Like everyone's getting a way better experience everywhere else. So what happened was we essentially like all got together, panicked, but essentially said the whole web is slow, right? This is a problem across the board. We met with Google, we met with large partners to try to solve this, and nobody solved it. So that's how Zeus, our product that we're making a lot of money on, was incubated. We recognized that there was a problem, that sites were slow, and that had a lot of different factors, and it wasn't necessarily diagnosed. So we built a software for it out of desperate need that we were trying to diversify, and realized that it was going to cannibalize not just our ad business, but our subscriptions business if we didn't build this, and that bred a new product. So, I think it's worth trying and worth figuring out, and experiments are key, right? I manage a large engineering team, and we goal that engineering team. I'm pushing commitments, like code commitments to prod, like putting them into production. Let's test it. Let's see. We could always take it down rather than analyze and see what we're going to do. Like, let's throw things out there, knowing that there could be issues. We'll bring it back. But that's kind of how we goal. And I think other institutions should start thinking about that, because like one day you do one of those things and it pops and.
Quick thing I'll say here is, just because you're diversifying your revenue doesn't mean you can add more people to do it. So you're also splitting your team's time and talent, and that becomes hugely problematic. If you go all in on one thing, you get very good at it, you can scale that opportunity. Let's say you now want to sell subscriptions and software. Well, you have a team that's been selling advertising only for the past however many years. They might not know how to sell software. You might have to retrain them. So that's the other danger, in my opinion, is like it takes it definitely takes a toll on your internal resources and especially talent to like retool them to do all of these different things.
Yeah, very true.
You guys always agree. What kind of panel is that?
No fun. We could find things we
fight.
disagree about.
The pizza. That's afterwards. More questions. David. Mike is wandering your way.
Thank you for passing me this microphone. Hi, I'm David Grant. I work at Facebook. And there, just so you don't come at me with pitchforks, I run our accelerator program, which trains people on how to build subscriptions. So one of the things we see with works exclusively with local news companies. One of the things we see, or I see all the time, is one of the biggest blockers to change is this feeling that we have to be what we used to be. Like if you're in a local news company, when you used to have this fortress business, you need a company that's going to be the size that you were in 1985, 1995, something like this. When the companies that are getting to something that looks sustainable are quite a bit smaller than that. And so my question to you is that right? Like the local news company, you're going to need a Radio Ambulante in every Cincinnati, every Roanoke, every Louisville, basically, and that's what the ecosystem can sustain. And there might be a bigger creature at 100 people that can be in a bigger city or something like that. But we just see people trying to sort sort of where are they? Am I a 20-person shop, or am I a 100-person shop, or am I a 1,000-person shop, and trying to figure that out. That's what I see in local news. I just wonder, what do you make of that, or does that resonate with your experience?
I definitely want Carolina to answer this because I think it's also very endemic to your business. But I just wrote this piece about the record label business. And it's fascinating that they're all going public right now at these insane valuations because they're making way more money than they were 10 years ago. But overall, they're making way less money than they were 20 years ago. And yet the optimism is there because they went like this during, sort of the digital download iTunes era. And they were here, when they were selling CDs. CDs were goldmine. So it went like this. And now that we're back in streaming, people are paying for music. It's starting to tick up, but they're only here. They're way smaller than they once were. I think the opportunity lies in the fact that even if you're not getting to where you once were, just being on the upward trajectory is success, truly. And we know Wall Street feels that way about the record business because they're valuing these companies like 5 to 8 times what they were. Now, obviously, a lot of these local companies are not necessarily publicly traded, although some are part of publicly traded conglomerates.
Increasingly less,
yeah. But I think that's the mentality that works. Is like, you don't have to be as big, but you have to be on an upward trajectory to be getting there.
We ask ourselves how big we want to get, and it's just like because we are not in the business of sustainability anymore. We're trying to scale. The question is how much, like how big we want to be, and there is you want to be the Gimlet for Latin America, and I'm pretty positive that we could do that if we don't die when we do that, or we maybe, but to pursue the dreams that we want to reach, I think we don't need to be that big because that will be also like a boomerang, right? Like we will need investors and there are other things that will be lost. So I think the question is there are certain people or certain probably local business owners who only want to, they just want to have like a decent, but decent is not bad, like a good salary, they dream of traveling every vacation, they want to send the kids to private schools, they want to like go to restaurants, come to New York, go to the best restaurants, hotels, not just like on the lower side. They want to have like a normal lifestyle, and they want to serve the community. And I think that depends on the motivations of these local media outlets. I hope that we see more of like people kind of like the old style kind of business, like my grandfather used to have, that he made money, but made money on a way that you can just scale, but you don't need to have these technology huge companies. And I think for us, we probably need to grow a bit, but I don't want this company to grow that is not that I won't be able to manage it, because I have kids, I have a dog, I want to just like travel, and it's not that I'm getting there. so yeah, to have like a reasonable life-work balance.
We have time for one last question.
I'm cheating.
2.
That's fine. I'm Neil Fryman from Morning Brew. 30 years from now, what will we say about the great newsletter boom of 2019?
I'll take this because I write a newsletter. There's definitely a boom. It's a story I've been meaning to write. I think it's very similar to other booms that we've seen. The great email boom. It's just that like email writ large for marketing. We saw a text boom actually, where like before regulators came in to stop spam text, people were getting crazy spam texts and calls. I think everything hits a point of saturation until someone either breaks it up, regulates it, whatever. I think in terms of email newsletters, I don't think like a regulator's going to come in, but I do think that consumers are just going to be sick of it. The value is going to go down. It's going to become less of a commodity. I see it already now because I'm writing a media newsletter. Someone pulled on the internet like a list of all the media newsletters. I was like, I didn't even know about majority of these, and I write one. So I think it's just going to become too saturated and it's going to fall out. However, one thing that's interesting, we're beta testing our app right now, and essentially we're doing the same journalism. We're taking the same kind of newsletter. We're just putting it in a different format on a mobile app. And I think that is what you're going to see come out of this, is it gets too saturated. So just move that same kind of quality that you get in a newsletter into some other product, and it'll just continue to move.
Yeah, the one thing that I'd say is that the business model of newsletters is really good, especially with upcoming trends. So like getting an email address is extremely personal and valuable, and consumers are opting in and engaging. So when it comes to thinking about models of how to monetize, you can port those, you own those, you kind of own that relationship. Whereas with other sort of platforms and booms of distribution, you didn't necessarily have that data or have that ownership. So I'd say that's a good thing when it comes to building a business. Like to Sara's point, there's always opportunity when you're growing that audience to be able to scale or pivot to other mediums or other platforms. But that identification of collecting that data, knowing your audience, being able to engage them directly is extremely powerful. Again, my email is probably one of my most personal things that I never respond to because it's just out of control. But like, I look at it every day and it's there, and I know what to unsubscribe and I know how to subscribe. And I think that element at least shows that it's a real value, a real business, and it's personal enough to, accelerate beyond even that medium.
Just one other thought that I had on this. There's also like a talent thing. I'm noticing like everyone's launching a newsletter. So suddenly the consumer is like, well, most of them are not good. And that becomes a huge problem for the whole product of newsletters. It used to be like, most news organizations had one, and that was your good product. Now news organizations look at ours. We have so many. I think it's becoming it's almost like Netflix. There's so much choice that you don't even want to deal. I think you're getting to that point.
But the problem is that you need to keep that relationship alive because you don't have to pass through the algorithm. So it's the most direct relationship with your consumer, and you can't just just lose them. I mean, if you have like 5 newsletters or whatever, we have just one. but yeah, we are considering like having more, but then we need to check out like the metrics or how to manage that relationship, and that it doesn't feel like a bot for them.
There was one last question before.
Hi, I'm Patrick George. I'm recently of Gizmodo Media Group. Sara, earlier you were talking about the economic crisis around local news, which is a really great one-sentence way to put that. Besides Patch, which is doing a good job of monetizing its local IP that's unique, and maybe the Texas Tribune, what local outlets are getting this right?
Some local outlets I've found are really going all in on just quality investigative journalism, and they haven't gotten the return quite there, but we are noticing a boom in local news awards. Like I said this during the Pulitzers 2 years ago, the winners were local. Like all of local was winning. And if you think about the biggest stories that have been broken this year, Julie Brown at the Miami Herald with Jeffrey Epstein, what they're reporting in the Midwest around the gymnastics coaches, quality editorial is winning. And one company, this is a controversial answer, but I'm just going to say it. One company that's invested a lot in local quality journalism is thriving right now, and it's The Athletic. They have put people on the ground. They've taken people from local papers, and they've said, cover this high school team for this town. And people are subscribing and buying it. And so I think the answer is anyone that's investing in quality journalism, either they're getting the return now or they're going to start to get the return. And for all of those private equity hedge fund soaked up entities that have cut costs, cut journalists, and tried to just scale operations, they're the ones that I think are struggling the most. They have terminal decline because they're not investing in the core journalism.
Fantastic last words. Thank you so much for that amazing discussion. Thank you for the engaged questions.
Thank you.
And drinks and snacks out there.